But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. January 15, 1929, Michael King Jr. was born to parents Michael Sr. and Alberta King in Atlanta, Georgia. Around 1934, Michael King Sr. changed his name to Martin Luther King Sr. in honor of the German Martin Luther, who championed the Protestant Reformation. Soon after, young Michael changed his name to Martin Luther King Jr. In 1939, King was becoming interested in singing after his performance in his church's choir at the Atlanta premiere of Gone with the Wind. He gained some notoriety for his singing and even joined his church's choir. King would often witness the oppression that Black Americans faced in the South. He even witnessed his own father taking a stand against racism, which would help shape him as an opponent of injustice against African Americans. King attended Booker T. Washington High School and became known as a great public speaker and as a member of the school's debate team. He became the assistant manager of a newspaper station for the Atlanta Journal at the age of 13. This made him the youngest person to hold that position. As a junior in high school, King traveled to Dublin, Georgia to compete in a public speaking contest. He outshined the competition to take home the first place prize. As King and his teacher were returning to Atlanta from the public speaking contest, they were forced to give up their seats for two white passengers. King stated that the anger he felt during this incident was one of the angriest moments of his life. Despite the constant racism he witnessed, he did not allow himself to underachieve in his studies. He was brilliant enough to only attend the 10th and 11th grades at Booker T. Washington High School. Morehouse College was accepting applications from high school juniors across the country who could pass their entrance exam. King, being the brilliant student he was, he passed the exam and entered Morehouse at the age of 15. As a student, King was heavily influenced by then president of Morehouse, Benjamin E. Mays, and his professor, George Kelsey. They helped him develop himself spiritually and to follow his true calling. King began to view Christianity as a force he could use to help uplift his fellow man. At the age of 18, King decided to accept his calling and enter the ministry. A year later, he used his voice to fight injustices and became an ordained minister. Being a young activist and wordsmith, King wrote a letter to the editor of the Atlanta Journal as a response to the violence blacks faced after World War II. He stated in his letter that blacks deserved equal rights as American citizens. King would graduate from Morehouse College in 1948 with a bachelor's in sociology and continued progressing with his spiritual studies. He began studying at Crozier Theological Seminary in 1948, where he would further develop his critical thinking skills as he challenged the concepts of God he was taught while examining his own beliefs. He would attend the seminary for 2 years before graduating at the top of his class. He began attending Boston University School of Theology to earn his doctoral degree, as well as the heart of a young woman named Coretta Scott. King and Scott were married in 1953 and would begin to build a legacy that would ultimately gain the respect of the world. In 1954, he became the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and by 1955, King would earn his doctoral degree from Boston University. 1955 was also the year the Montgomery bus boycott began. Claudette Colvin and Rosa Parks refusing to give up their seats to white passengers led to the planning of the boycott. Joanne Robinson, E.D. Nixon, and Ralph Abernathy organized the citizens of Montgomery, then founded the Montgomery Improvement Association. The purpose of the organization was to protest the racism black citizens of Montgomery faced using the Montgomery bus systems. King was appointed the spokesperson of the boycott by the founders of the MIA. Under the leadership of the founders and King, the boycott lasted for 385 days. It also led to the Montgomery bus systems to being desegregated via the United States District Court ruling in the Browder versus Gale case. During the boycott, King's home was bombed and he was arrested. These events put a national spotlight on the boycott and King as a civil rights figure. Under the leadership of Bayard Rustin, Glenn Smiley, and William Stewart Nelson, King was introduced to the nonviolent philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi, which he incorporated into his strategies for combating racism. In 1957, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was formed by King, C.K. Steele, Fred Shuttlesworth, and T.J. Jemison to organize nonviolent protests and bring attention to the plight of African Americans. He used his voice to address the issue of racism in front of a national audience for the first time during his prayer pilgrimage for freedom speech. In 1958, King published his book, Stride Toward Freedom, The Montgomery Story. His new book and his popular speech helped to push King into the national spotlight as a major civil rights leader. During a book signing in Harlem, New York, at the Bloomstein's department store, he was stabbed in the chest with a letter opener by a black woman named Izola Curry. In 1958, King became a published author again with the release of his book, The Measure of a Man. His activism led to him becoming the president of the Gandhi Society for Human Rights. The organization drafted a letter to President John F. Kennedy to issue an executive order to end racism in the South. To the disappointment of the Gandhi Society for Human Rights, Kennedy did not execute an executive order to help protect his African American citizens. The organization's actions caused the FBI to wiretap King's phone along with other members. They were accused of housing communists within their organization. J. Edgar Hoover was determined to derail King and the civil rights movement by using the wiretaps and other means. In 1961, King led the SCLC into the Albany movement, which was a mass nonviolent protest against segregation. They organized the citizens of Albany and attempted to patronize white businesses in the city. The Albany movement garnered national attention, which led to the arrest of King and other protesters. The protesters were jailed until the city of Albany decided to release them. In 1982, King returned to Albany and was sentenced to be jailed for 45 days. 3 days into his sentence, he was released and continued with his activism. King and the SCLC became involved in many more civil rights campaigns to end racism against his people. They organized, marched, protested, and used other political tactics to help further their cause. In 1964, Birmingham, Alabama, St. Augustine, Florida, Selma, Alabama, and New York City were places where King met racism head-on. 1964 was also the year that King became the youngest person ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize since 1901. In 1963, the March on Washington was organized by the Big Six, who were various leaders of civil rights organizations. The Big Six consisted of King, Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, A. Philip Randolph, John Lewis, and James L. Farmer Jr. During the march, King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. March 7, 1965 in Selma, Alabama is known as Bloody Sunday because the local police force attacked the peaceful protesters. March 9th, another march was attempted, but it was denied by the federal courts. Despite the ruling, King led protesters across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, but turned the people around before they truly violated the ruling. On March 25th, King and the SCLC was able to lead a successful march to the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama. There he delivered his How Long, Not Long speech at the close of the march. King's opposition to the Vietnam was a secret to the public until his public address in 1967, where he gave his Beyond Vietnam, a time to break the silence speech. King's opposition to the war made him a hero to some and an enemy of the state to others. In 1968, King called for a march against the war as an aid to his anti-war efforts. That same year, King and the SCLC organized the Public People's Campaign to help fight against the economic inequalities blacks and other Americans faced. King and his camp were settled in Memphis, Tennessee to support the Black Sanitary Public Workers strike. King was lodged at the Lorraine Motel. There, King was murdered by James Earl Ray at 6:01 p.m. The death of Martin Luther King Jr. was not the death of his legacy or the fight for civil rights. King literally dedicated his life to the advancement and freedom of his people from the clutches of racism in the South. Coretta Scott King and other civil rights leaders led the charge to create the nationally recognized Martin Luther King Day to honor the bravery and accomplishments of King.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we proudly stand on your shoulder. For more information, please visit www.ontheshoulders1.com.